To what extent can we really reduce the dangers from future disasters? Well, now on BBC World News, the World Debate from Geneva, asking what needs to be done to cut risk and who should do it.
Welcome to this BBC World Debate from Geneva. I'm Nick Gowing. Life is one big risk. Do you know or even think about what risk of disaster you run every day of your life? Perhaps just because of where you live. Should we or governments work to minimise risk and danger in our lives? Or is the threat of disaster something we just have to live with, ignoring the warnings, accepting the possible consequences if we happen to be in the wrong place? Disasters, do we prepare or just react? That is our BBC World Debate. Hello, we are at this specially convened UN conference for world experts on disasters and risks. Earthquakes, landslides, flooding, fires, drought, volcanic eruptions. What more can be done to reduce and minimize the human and economic cost of such natural disasters? Well, joining me are Senator Loren Legarda from the Philippines, a nation racked by regular natural disasters. She's the UN's champion for disaster risk reduction in Asia and the Pacific. GUIDO BERTOLASO, who's head of Italy's National Civil Protection Department. He coordinated emergency responses to the Aquila earthquake on April the 6th. You've just flown in from there just before this debate. Edward BORODZICS, Professor of Risk and Crisis Management at Portsmouth University Business School in the UK. And ARJUN KATOCH, who manages the UN Disaster Assessment and Coordination Team. You've coordinated responses to over 140 major disasters and emergencies so far. Welcome to you all. Well, why do people, whether in the rich, developed world or the poor, developing nations, often accept the risks of knowingly living with potential disaster? Vesuvius, near the city of Naples in Italy, is the world's most carefully watched volcano. 3 million people live within 15 kilometers. They are all at risk. Scientists say an eruption is now overdue. Similar risks are ignored or taken for granted in a multitude of locations worldwide. The unstable San Andreas fault runs through much of California. Tremors are regular. Another big earthquake is overdue, yet Californians apparently accept the risk. Bangladesh has always been one of the world's areas most prone to natural disasters. Global warming is raising sea levels, putting homes and traditional life patterns at immediate and unpredictable risk. Almost every natural disaster affects people who knew the risks, yet continued living in dangerous areas. Well, Senator Loren Legarda, you come from a nation racked, as I said, by disasters.
Yes.
What is the attitude to risks which are so well known in the Philippines?
Well, first of all, the Philippines is visited by at least 20 typhoons a year. But since this has been happening for many decades now, people are actually more prepared, more aware, and we do something about it. Now, your question is, how do people treat these typhoons and how do they respond to risks? It is a matter of, first, awareness, and for the government to actually do something about it. It is, I admit, very difficult to relocate people who live in coastal areas, who live by the foot of mountains, who live in areas where there are denuded forests that could cause mudslides and landslides. Urban settlements, informal settlers, many of them, who live under bridges or even in the sides of canals.
Do they think about risk every day, the risks they are running?
To be honest, Nick, in a country that is a developing nation, people think, families think of what is their next meal for the day. When people speak of risk, it is actually something difficult to understand. But it is a challenge, therefore, for us leaders of the nation to be able to prevent these risks from happening by integrating it into our development agenda.
Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. GUIDO BERTOLASO, you've literally just arrived from the center of an earthquake zone hit on April the 6th. Tens of thousands of people still are homeless. 300 people died in that earthquake. What is your view? The earthquakes came well before the people decided to live there. A new hospital built in the year 2000 collapsed. What is the understanding of risk in a developed country, in a developed community like that?
Because the problem is very simple. It's not the earthquake who kills people. What kills the people are buildings which are not very well built up in an area with a very high seismic risk. In Italy, for a number of years, we didn't pay enough attention to the seismic risk during the last 50 years.
But do the people who've lost their homes, or the families of those who've lost their lives, before April the 6th, there were tremors back in January, did they understand the risk they were running by living in L'Aquila?
Yeah, but what can you do? Are you able to evacuate 100,000 people when you don't know whether a major earthquake will take place or not? You just can organize emergency actions and spread information on how to behave in case of earthquake. But that is the countryside. That is their area where they've been born and where they've lived for years. So they cannot move. You have just to reorganize the building policy in order to have something which is very good in order to face earthquakes that may be even very strong.
ARJUN KATOCH.
I don't think anyone knowingly lives or wants to live in a place which is risky. 97% of the deaths in disasters, according to the World Bank, are in the developing world. Why do people live in such places? Because of economics, because of necessity. They have to earn a living. And so a lot of people who are living in places where they shouldn't be living are living because they have to. They don't have a choice. The risk is something far out in the future.
But what about the developed world? Not just L'Aquila, two big faults in the middle of the center of Italy, but places like California.
Yeah, people live in Beverly Hills in fire-prone areas because they like the view.
And the Florida, where they know there are going to be hurricanes every year.
Absolutely.
But why do people do that? What's their approach to risk?
Well, I think risk is abstract. And people don't really think of the abstract when they're selecting what they want to do or what they want to live in. And as I said, people live in Beverly Hills because they like the view. They lived on the Avon and Severn floodplain because they want to be near a river. So developed country is different.
Edward Borodzic, what's your view as someone who has to analyze and think intellectually and academically about risk and managing it? Why do people take these risks? Are they aware of the risks they're taking?
I think people are aware of risks, probably more acutely than many people would realise. One of the problems with risk is it's so amorphous, it's so difficult to define. There was an attempt about 10 years ago to try and define risk, and the only form of words that all these academics could come up with was risk means different things to different people in different contexts. What is a risk to me and what is a risk to you might be different, and there could be a variety of cultural, social, economic factors that might change the way we perceive the very same risk, whether it be an earthquake, smoking, travelling in a car, or a variety of other types of risks.
Loren, do you see it that way as well? A cultural issue?
Definitely. Risk is connected to poverty, as mentioned earlier. Risk is also very much culture. People who believe that maybe it would not happen to us, maybe God will save us, or maybe someone else will be hit but not us. So it is religious, it is cultural, it's social culture and economic as well.
What about, though, the economic side? The fact that there is the necessity to earn a living and take any opportunity going. How much is that putting to one side any thought of risk?
Yes. When people are born, let's say, by the coastal areas, there's no other place to live. When people regard the waters or the seas as their livelihood, or the mountains and the trees as part of their livelihood, where else can they go? So this is basically economic. It's the roots. Those are the places where they live. So they take the risk. And risk is the farthest from their mind because that is a source of their income. The land, the water, the mountains, that is a source of their sustenance.
Guido, how would you define this issue of who views risk in a different way?